War is often remembered in terms of victories and defeats, of flags raised and cities taken. But some of its most haunting stories unfold far from the battlefield, hidden in places no history book ever meant to linger on. In the final weeks of the Second World War, as the Third Reich collapsed in chaos and silence, one forgotten train sat rusting on a side track near Frankfurt. What it carried was not weapons, not soldiers, not supplies, but human lives abandoned to die. What American soldiers discovered when they opened its doors would follow them for the rest of their lives. They were warned there would be no mercy. The Americans, they were told, would shoot them the moment they were found. Women who had served the Third Reich would not be spared. Anyone who had worn the gray-green uniforms of Wehrmacht auxiliaries was already condemned. So when the train doors slammed shut in the chaos of April 1945, 89 German women believed they were being sent to their execution. The boxcar stank of rust and old grain. The wooden floor was bare, splintered, unforgiving. There were no benches, no water barrels, no rations, only bodies crushed together in the dark, breathing recycled air as iron wheels screamed against iron rails. Day bled into night, night into something worse. Hunger gnawed. Thirst became agony. 12 days later, American soldiers forced those same doors open in a forgotten rail yard outside Frankfurt, and what they found froze them in place. No one inside was standing. Most could not even lift their heads. Some had died days earlier, their bodies held upright only by the living who leaned against them for support. The survivors looked unreal, sunken eyes, cracked blackened lips, skin stretched tight over bone. And the smell. The stench of human waste, decay, and despair clung to the air like a punishment. One of the soldiers, a farm boy from Iowa named Thomas Riley, would later write to his mother, "I thought I had seen everything this war could show me. But when I looked into that train car, I realized I had seen nothing." These weren't soldiers. They were girls. And someone had left them to die like animals. The train had been abandoned 3 days earlier. In the final collapse of German command, no one knew who was meant to guard it, where it was headed, or even what it carried. It sat forgotten on a siding, wheels locked in rust, while the Reich burned around it. April 29, 1945. The morning was bitter cold. The sky hung low, the color of old steel. Private Riley and his squad were searching abandoned rail yards for weapons and supplies, anything the retreating Wehrmacht had left behind. They had found plenty in recent weeks: crates of ammunition, empty panzers, warehouses of uniforms that would never be worn. War leaves wreckage, and the Americans had learned how to sift through it. But when they approached a line of boxcars on the eastern siding, something felt wrong. The air was heavy. Sergeant Marcus Webb stopped first, his face tightening. He had smelled death before, every soldier had, but this was different. This was death mixed with something else. "You hear that?" he asked, raising his hand. At first, nothing. Then, barely audible, a sound like wind through broken glass. Not quite a cry. Not quite a moan. Something human, reduced to almost nothing. The boxcar doors were sealed with iron bars and chains, standard Wehrmacht procedure for prisoners. Webb ordered bolt cutters. As they waited, the sounds grew clearer. Scratching. Weak tapping. Someone trying to knock, but lacking the strength to close their fingers. When the cutters arrived, 3 men were needed to snap the rusted chains. The door resisted, swollen in its frame by moisture and neglect, then gave way with a metallic scream. The smell hit them like a physical blow. Riley staggered back, covering his mouth. Webb held his ground, though his face drained of color. He had helped liberate concentration camps. He had walked through Buchenwald weeks earlier. He believed he had seen humanity at its worst. He was wrong. Sunlight poured into the boxcar, revealing a nightmare. Bodies, dozens of them. Then Webb's eyes adjusted, and horror deepened. Some of the bodies were moving. Hands lifted weakly toward the light. Eyes cracked open. Mouths moved without sound. "My God," someone whispered. "They're alive." Not all of them. 3 bodies lay motionless in the corner, skin waxy and gray, dead for days. But the rest, 60, maybe 70, were breathing. Barely, but breathing. And every one of them was a woman. They wore torn remnants of Wehrmacht auxiliary uniforms, gray-green skirts and jackets, filthy and shredded. Some were barefoot. Others clutched small suitcases, holding onto possessions even as their bodies failed. Hair hung in matted clumps. Faces were skeletal, cheekbones sharp beneath stretched skin. Near the door sat a young woman, perhaps 20 years old, propped against the wall. Her eyes were open, staring, not with fear, not with hope, but with emptiness. Her lips moved. Webb knelt beside her. "Can you speak?" he asked. "Do you speak English?" No sound came. Her throat was too dry. He unscrewed his canteen and tilted it toward her mouth. She flinched, expecting violence. But when the water touched her lips, her eyes widened. She grabbed the canteen with shaking hands, sipping in tiny gasps, as if her body had forgotten how to drink. "Get medics," Webb shouted. "Now. Water, blankets, everything." Within minutes, the rail yard exploded into motion. Trucks arrived. A field hospital was summoned. Officers abandoned occupation duties to organize a rescue. One by one, the women were carried from the boxcar. Most could not walk. Some could not even sit upright. Medics worked with grim urgency, checking pulses, starting IVs, wrapping skeletal bodies in army blankets. Some women cried when touched. Others stared, stunned by the idea that this was real. The young woman Webb had given water to grabbed his wrist as she was lifted onto a stretcher. Her grip was weak but desperate. 12 days, she whispered in broken breath. 12 Tage. Webb didn't speak German, but he understood. 12 days locked in darkness. No food. No water. No hope. "You're safe now," he said softly, knowing she might not understand the words, but hoping she understood the voice. Her eyes closed, not in death, but in exhaustion deeper than sleep. By noon, all survivors were evacuated. 86 women rescued. 3 left behind to be buried later with what dignity could be found. Among the possessions recovered was a small, water-stained diary. It belonged to Margaret Hoffman, a radio operator from Hamburg. Her final entry, dated April 26, read, "No water for 4 days. Greta died this morning. I think I will be next. I'm not afraid. Only tired." But Margaret did not die. And what happened to her and the others in the weeks that followed would shatter everything they believed about enemies, mercy, and humanity. By the 3rd week, the women were moved out of the field hospital and into a converted schoolhouse that now served as a displaced persons camp. It was not comfortable in any grand sense, no chandeliers, no soft carpets, but it was clean, heated, and secure. After 12 days sealed inside a boxcar and weeks on the edge of death, that was enough. The camp was overseen by American military police, with civilian volunteers from the Red Cross filling the gaps. The first change came quietly but carried enormous weight. Their uniforms were taken away. The gray-green remnants of Wehrmacht auxiliary clothing, stiff with dirt and memory, were replaced, not with prison garb, but with simple civilian dresses pulled from American supply depots. Wool, brown, gray, plain, modest, intact, clean. That detail mattered more than anyone expected. They were also given work, not punishment, not labor details, but light, purposeful tasks meant to restore rhythm to shattered lives. Some helped in the kitchens, peeling potatoes and washing dishes. Others folded laundry or sorted supply crates. The Americans believed structure would steady minds as much as medicine strengthened bodies. Experience would prove them right. Margaret Hoffman was assigned to the camp library, a single room filled with donated books, some German, some English. Her job was simple: organize shelves, repair torn bindings, keep records. At first, she worked in silence, hands moving automatically. Then, slowly, she began to read again. The first book she chose was a German translation of an American novel she had never heard of, The Grapes of Wrath. As she turned its pages, she encountered a world that made no sense to her upbringing: Americans who were poor, displaced, hungry, driven from their homes by forces beyond their control. This was not the America she had been taught about. This was not a land where everyone lived in excess while the rest of the world starved. It was the first fracture in a wall that had surrounded her since childhood. Others felt similar cracks forming. Helga Schmidt, a former nurse from Berlin, was assigned to assist in the camp infirmary alongside American medical staff. She watched them tend to German civilians with the same focus and care they gave their own soldiers. She saw scarce supplies used without hesitation on people who had been enemies only weeks earlier. One afternoon, a young American medic named David sliced his hand while opening a crate. Helga instinctively stepped forward, wrapped the wound, and secured the bandage. David stared at her, surprised. "You don't have to do that," he said. "You're not obligated." Helga, whose English was improving, frowned slightly. "You are hurt," she replied. "So I help." David smiled. "Fair enough." That moment stayed with her, not because it was dramatic but because it was ordinary. In the world she had known, enemies did not tend each other's wounds. Enemies did not smile. Enemies existed only as threats, not as people. And yet here she was, inside a camp run by those she had been taught to fear, discovering something far more unsettling than cruelty: normality. The food deepened the shock. 3 meals a day. Every day. Breakfast was porridge or bread with butter and jam, real butter, real jam. Lunch was soup or stew, sometimes with vegetables, sometimes meat. Dinner was heavier still: potatoes, canned vegetables, occasionally chicken or beef. For women who had lived for years on ersatz coffee and thin turnip soup, who had watched families weaken while officials promised victory was near, this abundance was incomprehensible. Anna Muller, a 23-year-old former telephone operator from Munich, recorded it all in her journal. On May 15, 1945, she wrote, "Today they gave us chocolate. American chocolate. I cannot remember the last time I tasted it, 1943? Maybe earlier. It was so sweet my teeth hurt. I ate it slowly, afraid it would disappear too quickly. Then I cried because while I eat chocolate, my mother and sisters are probably digging through rubble in Munich, searching for scraps. What kind of person eats chocolate while her family starves?" That guilt haunted all of them. They were fed while their families went hungry. They were safe while their cities lay in ruins. And they were receiving kindness from the very people their government had warned them to hate. Some responded by withdrawing, speaking little, eating without pleasure, moving through each day as if life were something happening elsewhere. Others reacted with anger, insisting loudly that this generosity was temporary, that American cruelty would soon reveal itself. But most, Margaret, Anna, Helga, existed in a painful middle space. They could not deny what they were experiencing. The beds were real. The food was real. The care was real. And if all of that was real, then something else had to be false. Late one evening, several women gathered in a dormitory room. 3 weeks had passed. Their faces had softened. Color had returned. Hair had been washed, cut, tamed. Some even smiled now, cautiously. But that night the mood was heavy. "Do you think they'll punish us eventually?" asked Greta Fischer, who had once worked as a secretary in a Wehrmacht communications office. "Maybe they're just waiting." A few nodded. It sounded reasonable. Helga shook her head. "I've worked with their doctors every day," she said quietly. "They aren't pretending. They truly want us to live." "But why?" someone asked. "We're the enemy." Helga hesitated. "I think they see us as people first. Not Germans. Not enemies." The room fell silent. The idea was so alien it felt dangerous to touch. Finally Anna spoke. "If that's true," she said softly, "then everything we were taught was a lie." No one argued. The change did not arrive like lightning. It came slowly, painfully, like a bone breaking and being set incorrectly, then forced to heal anyway. Each day challenged beliefs that had once felt unshakable. In early June letters arrived. The Red Cross had begun reconnecting displaced civilians with their families, and during dinner one evening envelopes were distributed. Margaret Hoffman received one. The paper was worn, the ink smudged, the envelope passed through many hands. Her mother's handwriting filled the page. "My dearest Margaret, I believed you were dead. We were told all women from your unit had been killed. I have mourned you for 2 months. Yesterday the Red Cross told us you are alive in American custody. I cried for an hour. Hamburg is destroyed. We survive on whatever we can find. Your father is very weak. Your sister married a British soldier last week. I know this will shock you, but without him we would starve. Please write when you can. I never thought I would say this again. I love you." Margaret read the letter 3 times. Then she folded it carefully, stepped outside, and found a quiet corner behind the building. There, alone, she collapsed. Her sister had married the enemy. Her mother, once loyal, once proud, was grateful for it. The world had turned inside out. Across the camp, similar letters were being opened. Fathers cursing Hitler. Brothers crippled and begging. Mothers thanking God for American occupation because at least it brought order and food. The contradictions were crushing. One night, unable to sleep, Anna Muller sat in the common room and wrote until her hand ached. "I am ashamed not because of my work during the war. I was only a telephone operator. I connected calls. I followed orders. I am ashamed because I am happy here. Because the thought of returning to the ruins fills me with dread. I am safe in this enemy camp. Federal protected. Treated like a human being. What kind of German does that make me?" She closed the journal. There were no answers. Only questions that grew heavier by the day. Then in mid-June the Americans forced a reckoning. A projector was set up in the main hall. The women were told to attend, but not what they would see. When the lights dimmed, black and white footage flickered to life. American soldiers, barbed wire, camps. Then the camera revealed the truth. Bodies. Piles of bodies. Skeletal prisoners in striped uniforms. Mass graves. Gas chambers. Evidence of murder on an industrial scale. The room gasped. Some women fled. Others covered their faces. Margaret did not move. She stared at the screen as names filled the air: Buchenwald, Dachau, Bergen-Belsen. These were not rumors. Not propaganda. This was documented reality. When the lights came back on, silence crushed the room. Then someone sobbed. Then another. Soon the sound of grief filled the hall. Colonel James Patterson stood at the front. "I did not show you this to punish you," he said through an interpreter. "You did not commit these crimes. But you served a system that made them possible. You deserve the truth." He paused. "We treat you with kindness not because we forget what Germany became, but because we refuse to become the same." Then he left. The women sat there long after, understanding at last that the monster they had served was real, and that those who destroyed it were choosing humanity instead of revenge. That night, Anna Muller opened her journal one last time and wrote words she had not known she was capable of forming. "Now I understand. The soap. The food. The kindness. This is no deception. It is a lesson. They are showing us what we were meant to be. What humanity looks like when it is not poisoned by hatred. I believed captivity would break me. Instead, it is rebuilding me. And I do not know if I will ever forgive myself for needing the enemy to teach me how to be human." By July, the women's physical recovery was undeniable. The hollow faces had filled out. Skin once gray now carried warmth and color. Hair shone again. When they looked into mirrors, they saw versions of themselves that had been gone for years. But the greater transformation was not visible. One afternoon, while sorting donated clothing in a storage room, Margaret Hoffman discovered a full-length mirror. She stopped without meaning to. The woman reflected back at her was clean, healthy, and calm. She wore a simple blue dress that fit her properly. Her hair was neatly pinned. She looked shockingly ordinary, like someone living a normal life. But she wasn't. She was a former prisoner of war, sustained by the people who had destroyed her country. The contradiction struck her so forcefully she had to sit down. She lowered herself onto a wooden crate, staring at her reflection as something inside her shifted, not shattered but realigned, like a bone finally settling into place. "They saved us," she whispered into the quiet room. "The enemy saved us." For the first time she allowed herself to say it aloud, not just the rescue from the train but the deeper one. The rescue from lies, from propaganda, from a worldview built on superiority and hate. Dr. Sarah Mitchell found her there 20 minutes later, tears still tracing lines down Margaret's face. "Are you all right?" she asked gently. Margaret looked up. Her English was imperfect but growing stronger. "You make me better," she said slowly. "Not only body. Inside. You make me see truth." Mitchell understood. She had witnessed this moment again and again, the instant when an entire belief system collapsed and something fragile but honest began to grow in its place. "It takes courage," Mitchell said softly, "to admit you were wrong. Most people never do." Margaret nodded. "Is hard," she said. "Very hard. But necessary." That evening, Margaret gathered several women in the common room, Anna, Helga, Greta, and others bonded by shared suffering and shared awakening. "We have been here 3 months, Margaret began. 3 months of being cared for by people we were taught to hate. And I think we must say what that means." The room was silent. "It means everything we believed was false," she continued. "The Americans are not monsters. They are not cruel. They are people who believe every life has value. Even enemy lives. Even ours." Some women nodded. Others stared at their hands. "And if they can see us as human," Margaret said, her voice trembling, "then maybe we must learn to see ourselves that way too." Anna stood. "For the first time," she said, "I feel allowed to be human. Not a tool. Not a servant of the state. Just human. And I am grateful, even if that gift came from those who defeated us." The discussion lasted deep into the night. There were tears, arguments, moments of denial. But when it ended, something had changed. They were no longer simply prisoners waiting to be sent home. They were women standing at the edge of a second life. In August 1945, the orders arrived. Europe's war was over. Germany was divided. Rebuilding had begun. The women would be repatriated. Reactions were mixed. Some rejoiced. Others were afraid. A few, like Anna, felt something close to grief. "I don't want to leave," Anna admitted while packing her small Red Cross bag. "I don't want to go back." "That doesn't make you weak," Margaret said. "It makes you honest." "My family will ask what happened," Anna whispered. "And if I tell them the Americans saved me, they'll call me a traitor." "Then tell the truth anyway," Margaret said. "Someone has to." The night before departure, the Americans organized a farewell gathering. There was coffee. Music. Some women danced awkwardly with American soldiers. Laughter filled the room. Dr. Mitchell watched from the side. Margaret approached her. "You gave me back my life," she said quietly. "And my humanity. What will you do now?" Mitchell asked. "I will rebuild," Margaret said. "But I will never forget what I learned, that kindness is stronger than hate, and mercy stronger than victory." The next morning, 83 women boarded the buses. They waved goodbye. Some cried. All carried hope. Anna looked back through the window, her journal heavy in her pocket. Her final entry read, "Today I leave captivity. But I am freer than I have ever been. Because I know the truth and the truth has set me free." Margaret Hoffman returned to Hamburg, later working as a translator. She would spend her life telling the same story, not about hatred but about soap, bread, and dignity. Because in the end what saved them was not force. It was humanity.